Hey guys, we've been receiving a lot of concern for our project over copyright and what it means for us as we get further into development. We listened to feedback and we want to address these issues openly with the community and provide an outlook on how fan-made projects, like us, can deal with these rising issues. The scope of this video will be covering the controversial subject at large, copyright and trademark, and how it may affect your fan-made project. We'll be looking at international copyright treaties and a little of US and Canadian copyright law. The reason being is that there are myths and misleading information surrounding the fandom when dealing with these issues. Such fear-mongering only stagnates the fandom's growth as a whole. Before we get into that, I'm Airplay, the lead programmer at the Overmare Studios, better known for working on the game Fallout Equestria. Copyright and trademark have always been big issues that lingered in the background before I jumped on this project. A few years back, I started developing a distribution protocol. It quickly evolved into a piece of commercial software that was used in thousands of servers across the globe. It was my first business venture, and a successful one. I had to ask myself a lot of copyright infringement questions, such as a developer, how much responsibility do I carry for infringers who utilize this protocol? Do I have to monitor activity? And many other questions. All of these I eventually found answers to. I have composed this information from publicly available sources, experience, and consulted with a practicing lawyer on the matter. As a disclaimer, while such advice should never be taken as absolute or without professional consultation, it should give you a better understanding of copyright and trademark. I'm still sure to receive a ton of hate mail, but some pony has to touch on the issue at this point. Let's start off simple. What exactly is copyright? In short, it is the exclusive ownership granted to the creator, basically enabling them to do whatever they want with whatever they made. The biggest myth I've heard is copyright protects ideas. This is incorrect. Copyright protects expression, not ideas. While still implied in the US, Canada extends this notion that a copyright must have a well-defined fixation. While they may seem similar, it is important to distinguish the two. Otherwise, every movie scene or independent film featuring the protagonist walking off into the sunset would be considered infringement. Let's now look at what fandom projects are. Usually they borrow characters, settings, or plot from some popular medium and project it onto a blank canvas with new ideas injected, either for creative expression or those who do it solely for self-interest. Let's look at an example. Let's say you took the entire season of MLP and ported it into 3D. You then posted these on the internet to share with everyone. You say to yourself, this isn't an original work, copyright need not apply. This is entirely untrue. This falls under a derivative work. Transferring mediums does not grant immunity from copyright infringement. This is exactly what fandom projects are, even fan art, derivative works. Not in whole all the time, but at least in part. However, do keep in mind that in no case does copyright protection for an original work of authorship extend to any idea, procedure, process, system, method of operation, concept, principle, or discovery, regardless of the form in which it is described, explained, illustrated, or embodied in such work. That's a real mouthful. But that appears like hardly an accurate portrayal of the current situation. If there is anything this fandom has, it is some amazing user-created content, not just fan art. Josh Wattles, advisor-in-chief to DeviantArt, makes a decent talk about fan art, however is ambiguous about it at times. Even Tommy Oliver touches on copyright when defending fandoms. Both of these videos can be found in the description below. What is the difference between fan art, animations, and games? Nothing. All are forms of expression. Different mediums don't differentiate between each other when it comes to copyright. When projects like MLP Online and Main 6 shift their goals or shut down, there will always be a huge controversy. It could be argued that games have a bigger impact on the original work given their size and popularity. However, it is still the exclusive right of the copyright holder to respond to any derived work. So it quickly becomes misrepresentation of the information among the fandom when interpreting fan-made projects like our own. Let's shift gears a bit. I want to introduce you to Canadian copyright law. Depending on the font and format you may receive the bill in, it spans roughly 176 pages, including both English and French. We do have international intellectual property treaties such as the Berne Convention, UCC Geneva, UCC Paris, TRIPS, and WCT. While there is some harmonization, what is interesting about these international agreements is that they do have some exemptions to copyright to allow things like fair use. And we can expand on those exemptions. And that is exactly what Canada did. To bring its Copyright Act into the 21st century, Bill C-11 was made, passed, and royally assented by the Governor General on June 29, 2012. What is so nice about this bill? While fair use is fine and all, an exception was added specifically for non-commercial user-generated content, generally coined as the mashup provision. Like the fair dealing, this exception is subject to several conditions, namely that the user identifies the source of the original work, that the underlying work copied was legally acquired, and that the use did not have substantial adverse effects on the commercial exploitation of the underlying work. This is helpful for any fan-made project to say, yes, we are legal, at least if you live and have your infrastructure based in Canada like us. However, that doesn't always stop cease and desists from coming in. Cease and desists are fired at everyone and everything. I mean, Google got a DMCA takedown notice from Microsoft for its Gmail services. An honest mistake, but they can get pretty ridiculous and are used as a scare tactic. There are resources that can help you, and it won't cost you either. When receiving a cease and desist, submit it to the clearinghouse. You can find both of these links in the description as well. While they cannot provide legal advice, they can annotate it with questions and answers and provide you some helpful resources for you to understand what you're dealing with. A lot of the scare tactics employed come from when the affected company would like to try and claim statutory damages. This is what hits everyone hard. Being non-commercial reduces any potential statutory damages significantly if you find yourself in a tight spot. However, you should never be manipulated into submission to begin with. Moving on to trademarks, I'd only like to touch lightly on the issue. A trademark is a word or words, design, a combination of these, used to identify the goods or services of one person or organization and to distinguish these goods or services from those others in the marketplace. However, two products can exist in a marketplace with the same registered trademark, but different scopes. A trademark scope must be defined at registration and cannot be modified at a later date. Now, Fallout, registered by Bethesda Softworks, in the Canadian scope does not cover downloadable computer game software. Their newer title, Fallout New Vegas, does mention that though. Since we don't fall under the context of the where scope for Fallout, we can use it, and you can check the description for links again. On a broader subject to trademark, such names like the 6 main characters in My Little Pony only have their scope limited to toy ponies. And for some reason Fluttershy was abandoned. Yes, her trademark was abandoned. While this doesn't exclude the character from copyright, it was an interesting find. So, with that all cleared up, I got a game to get back to making. See ya.